Today on the show, we are taking a long sip of water from the tall, sexy, wet glass known as Stilgar Ben Fifrawi.
There's like drops of little water on the outside of the glass. It's like it's hot. It's hot here in New York. Looks refreshing. Oh, and so sexy. What a sexy glass of water.
Sexy. My God.
I want to be friends with Javier Bardem. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name is Leo.
And my name's Abu.
Oh, and today on the show, we are talking about our favorite Navy boy, Stilgar.
That's right.
Oh, it's so shocking that we haven't talked about him.
I'm shocked. 5 years into this podcast, and we've never done an episode on Stilgar?
But here's the thing. I feel like we've talked about him by talking about the other characters, because as we'll cover today, he is so involved in so many people's lives. I think he might be the main character.
We found a new main character of the Dune saga.
The more we look, the more we find. But yeah, very exciting. Can't wait to talk to him. Now, let's take care of some housekeeping. Stilgar has appointed Shout Out Mapes to be our housekeeper, and we need to make her happy. Again,
we do.
Stilgar's at the heart of everything. So the episode today contains light spoilers for the plot of Dune, because we're mostly going to be talking about Stilgar's life up to the first pages of the first book.
That's right.
Nevertheless, naturally, we're talking about characters like Shout Out, like Jameis, like Liet Kynes. If you haven't read the first book, you're not going to get as much out of this. So light spoilers, but genuinely just to enjoy the episode, make sure you've read the first book.
That's right. And of course, up top, a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons, Daniel Dion and Seth Redden Greer. Folks, I don't know if you two have blood siblings yet, but I'd like to become your blood sibling.
Can we apply?
Can we make that happen? What's the ritual?
What's the paperwork?
What's the application process like?
Is this a courthouse thing, or do we do
you need my social security number? I can say it. It's 3, 4.
I'll get it notarized. I think USPS notarizes. So that's...
Well, until we get the paperwork figured out, for now, we do want to say thank you. We are so grateful for your very generous support for this podcast. It genuinely helps keep the lights on. Of course, that thank you extends to all of our patrons who support at every level. Your support, month to month, is what builds the foundation upon which this show runs. And we can't thank you all enough.
That's very true. And if you are currently not in a place to become a monthly supporter on Patreon, and again, tiers as low as $2 a month, $5 a month. If you are unable to commit to that, it's okay. We also have a link for a one-time tip. You can show your appreciation that way. We have a small team, and ultimately every little amount helps us do what we do.
That's right.
So thank you so much in advance.
Thank you indeed. Okay, housekeeping out of the way. Shout out Mapes is proud of us. Let's talk about the game plan for today's episode, all about Stilgar. We will basically be going chronologically through the early life of Stilgar. We'll start with his earliest years, what we know about his childhood and his upbringing. Then we will move on to his arrival at the iconic Siege Tabur. Ever heard of it? And of course, the events that take place at Siege Tabur, including a life-changing relationship that he builds with the Kynes family. And finally, in today's episode, we'll wrap up by examining his rise to power, becoming the Nabe of Siege Tabur, and how he ran the siege, what his leadership style was like up until the moments that the Atreides arrived on the planet.
Indeed.
Okay, before we jump in and talk about our Navy boy, let's take a quick break. Let's collect ourselves. Let's take a tall sip of water, if you have it nearby at hand. When we come back, we're talking about Stilgar. We'll see you in a minute.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're ready to learn about Stilgar because let's kick this conversation off. Let's share a description of the man.
Yeah.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Set the scene.
And this is almost genuinely shocking because I didn't know how tall Stilgar was canonically. Quote, Stilgar was a tall man, well over 2 meters, and appeared to tower over his brethren. Appeared to? He
literally towering.
Literally. A history of success in combat, some of it costly, was evidenced by scars, old and new, which covered much of his body. He possessed in large measure the mercurial temperament characteristic of Fremen. He could turn from consoling an injured child as tenderly as any woman in his siege to ruthlessly hunting an enemy's blood with his crisp knife without a visible wrench. And he was equally skilled at both. End quote.
My guy.
My guy. Oh, my goals?
Folks, find you a guy
Find you a guy
who will console an injured child as well as he will ruthlessly hunt the blood of his enemies. If that's not your bar on Hinge,
yeah,
your bar is too low.
And don't settle for anybody under 2 meters tall. By the way, that is almost 6'7". So if
That's
your
right.
guy isn't 6'7" plus,
Yep.
also
Loves kids.
well over 2 meters. This is not, he's not 2.1 meters. He is.
No. A great description. That's who we're talking about today, folks. Stilgar, the man, the myth, and the legend. My goodness. Well, let's rewind the clock, though. Before he became well over 2 meters tall, presumably he was a child well below 2 meters, I would hope.
Born well over 2 meters tall.
So let's talk about the little we know about Stilgar's childhood.
Indeed.
We know from the Dune Encyclopedia that Stilgar ben Fifrawi was born in the year 10,141 AG, and he spent his youth in Siege Umbu. That is about as detailed as things get. We know very little about what these early years of his life, the first decade or so of his life, was like, outside of the fact that we know that his birth name was actually Tuan, Tuan. And
cool.
That is actually the name by which he went for most of his childhood.
Yeah.
Now, the Dune Encyclopedia also points out that once he started going out, once he was old enough to kind of join the Fremen troops in raids against the Harkonnens, there are a couple of references to him being called Sakan, Sahkan, but, quote, verification of this point is difficult to obtain, end quote. The Dune Encyclopedia in-universe historians have only been able to find reference to this name and reference to Stilgar in a couple of vague sources.
Right. This is akin to Paul being Usul.
Correct.
For the people of Siege Tabur. This is kind of his verification ID that proves he's part of Siege Tabur out in the wild. If they know he's Usul, he knows they're part of Siege Tabur. So,
yeah, exactly.
Of course, in-universe historians would struggle to verify someone's like private Siege name.
Yep. This wouldn't be the name he would use publicly.
Right. It's not on his business card. Stilgar, a.k.a. Sakan.
A.k.a. Sakan.
Yeah. But this is notable because apparently the word Sakan is the Fremen name for a type of desert hawk, which is so cool.
Okay.
Because
that's cool.
Stilgar eventually, naturally, as we see in the first book, in the first movie, gets super wrapped up in House Atreides, and House Atreides, their emblem is the hawk, which is so cool. Hey! I mean, it's fun. It's cool to see these kind of little alignments. And the Fremen who have their world of superstition and their beliefs, I imagine Stilgar, if his name is Sakan, I could imagine him going, the Duke is called the Red Hawk of Atreides? Okay.
I'm going to sit on that one, I'm going to let me think about that one.
Let that percolate.
Well, Tuan, Sakan, leaving his other names behind, the name that he will most well be known by, Stilgar, the name that we know him by, we're told is a name he earned at 12 years old. So this is in the year 10,153 AG. And this is also the same year that he was made a Sand Rider, which we know aligns with what Stilgar tells Paul in the book.
Right.
12 is when most Fremen ride their first sandworm and graduate to becoming Sand Riders.
So when 15-year-old Paul is like, "Didn't I do good, coach?" He's like, "You didn't do as well as I did 3 years earlier than you." But yeah, sure.
Exactly. A little late, but we got you here, buddy.
Yeah.
So this is where, during a couple of successful raids on Harkonnen villages, once he becomes a Sand Rider, it's around the age of 12 here that Stilgar officially earns the name Stilgar, and that is the name that sticks with him for the rest of his life from here on forward.
So fast forwarding a few years, because again, the Dune Encyclopedia is super, super sparse on details about this time in Stilgar's life.
Yeah.
He ends up departing Sietch Umbu at the order of none other than planetologist Pardo Kynes.
Hello, Daddy Kynes.
Daddy Kynes, yeah. In the year 10,157. So basically, Pardo Kynes, right? He's the imperial planetologist. We've actually, I think we did a full episode on him, or at least we did a spice morsel about his life. He was on Arrakis by imperial decree, and he was experimenting with establishing more poverty grasses and kind of stabilizing the dunes and seeing if he can get toward this green Arrakis, and also basically falling in love with the Fremen way of life. And as part of this, Pardo was requesting help with new plantings of these poverty grasses on one of the palmeries, and requested help from some like local sieges, which included Sietch Umbu. Stilgar joined him on this outing and immediately left an impression on Pardo. He's clearly a remarkable young man, even though he is young, still very impressive. And here's the quote, "The young Fremen demonstrated an ability to lead groups of workers, and Kynes delegated as much work to him as he could handle." End quote.
A natural leader.
A natural leader. He's getting along with people. These are not even necessarily people he knows, but he's leading them well in this work, which is very cool to see. Now, he was so impressive. He left such a mark on Pardo Kynes that the very next year, Kynes invited him, said, "Hey, dude, you're great. Do you want to come join me at Sietch Tabr? This is where I'm based out of. Ever heard of Sietch Tabr?" Stilgar's like, "No, what is that?" So Pardo invites him back to Sietch Tabr, and Stilgar accepts. He, I guess, found meaning in the work, or he enjoyed the work, or he maybe had a taste of leadership and liked that. So he ended up joining Pardo Kynes back at Sietch Tabr, where he would spend almost the rest of his life. And just pause. So Pardo Kynes, and of course, this is the father of Liet Kynes and the grandfather of Chani, is the reason that Stilgar is at Sietch Tabr. Is just so remarkable to me. You know, we see in Dune, Stilgar and Sietch Tabr are so, they're so intertwined. And to know that it is the Kynes family that brought him there is just really fascinating.
Yeah, it's a fun historical connection between two characters that we know so much about from the books themselves. Now, let's talk about Stilgar's years at Sietch Tabr. We're told that the next 17 or so years of Stilgar's life were pretty routine. He fit right into the lifestyle at Sietch Tabr. He did what the other men and warriors did. He spent a lot of time helping out Pardo with the mission toward a green Arrakis. He really fit right in, and he was an effective worker and continued to be impressive. Although there was a bit of a hiccup when he first arrived. There were a couple of little details he had to take care of, cross your T's, dot your I's.
Yeah. Standard stuff.
Standard stuff. The first of these little hiccups was a hot-headed Fremen who decided to challenge Stilgar to a fight.
Of course.
Because he was jealous about how much attention Stilgar was getting from Pardo. It was clear that the Ummah, Pardo Kynes, preferred and loved Stilgar. He was kind of the favorite student. And this other Fremen was jealous of that.
This toxic, insecure Fremen being like,
I know.
No, he's my leader.
No, Daddy loves me more.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, we don't even know his fucking name. That's how irrelevant this guy is, because Stilgar wipes the floor with him. Stilgar obviously wins this fight, takes care of this hot-headed Fremen, and this actually won him even more respect and renown within the siege. It actually earned him the acceptance of Siege Tibur's nabe at that time, Forad. So Stilgar continuing to sort of cement his position among these people and in the home that he will be so deeply connected to for the rest of his life.
So take notes, folks. If you ever want to get accepted in a siege, get challenged to a life and death fight and win.
Yep, fight someone.
Win, and then everyone will respect you more. I think that's the lesson here.
That's how it works. You get a new job, find someone, fight them, win.
The most hot-headed
get your
person.
boss's approval.
That's how. Is that corporate America? Is that what we've become?
Yeah. I think that's the lesson I'm taking away from this for sure. Now, speaking of Stilgar finding his place among Siege Tibur, another thing happens shortly after he fights the hot-headed Fremen that further solidifies that Stilgar is a member of Siege Tibur. Because Pardo Kynes makes Stilgar blood brother to his then 3-year-old son, Liet Kynes, in 10,159 AG.
Whoa.
So to put us on the timeline here, Stilgar is only 18 years old at this point, and he has impressed Pardo Kynes so much, he has fit so well into the Siege Tibur lifestyle, that Pardo has decided you will be blood brother to my newborn son.
That's so wild and very, very cool. I mean, clearly a sign of how much Pardo has come to respect him.
Yeah, clearly.
But also, Liet's 3 years old. And that's, you're really entrusting, in many ways, you're entrusting your son to be taken care of by someone that you met only a year ago. But that is clearly the quality of Stilgar. Plus, he's like, all right, he just killed a man. And also, I have to imagine, he's like 18 years old now. And I don't know that he's at his full, well over 2 meter height. But this is a tall guy.
But he's gone through a growth spurt. You know, he's well past puberty.
Yeah.
Well into puberty at this point.
Pardo's like, my God, you're so tall. Take care of my boy. Based solely on your height. You can dunk without leaving the ground. This is incredible.
Yeah. Folks, that's tall people privilege right there for you.
I'm blood brother to like 9 children. It's crazy. And I'm so much shorter than Stilgar. It's crazy. Anyway,
I know.
Standards have really come down, or they're about to go up, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. Well, along those lines, Stilgar would basically then go on to act as a de facto father to Liet Kynes, raising the young man as a Fremen. This is actually pulling from Liet Kynes' entry in the Dune Encyclopedia. Quote, many of the duties that would ordinarily have been filled by his father had been taken over by Stilgar. End quote.
There you go.
Huge. I mean, again, Pardo, we know from Liet's, I think we did a full episode on Liet. Pardo is busy, right? Managing both his imperial life, but also his little project. So he didn't have a lot of time to like be around as a Fremen father.
Yeah. Always traveling.
I mean, come on, bring your son to work. And he would eventually, but initially he was very distant and very absent. So Stilgar is basically this young father. And despite being young, he was clearly good at it. Like he was clearly a good father figure because Liet was also, I mean, being raised by Stilgar, he was an all-around successful kid. He became a worm rider himself under Stilgar's care. You know, he's checking all of the boxes of a successful young Fremen. And all of this credit really should go to Stilgar for his ability to raise this child. Also, as we were doing research for this episode, it really does seem like the Fremens have this kind of like, it takes a village mentality. And people are constantly stepping in. There are, you know, as people are dying out in the sands or they're getting killed in raids or they're being killed in collapsing caves or whatever, they're very quick to become new family units and become new, we're going to take care of you. No questions asked. So I do also want to shout out here how sophisticated and how really beautiful the Fremen culture is, that they are so quick to care for one another, even if they are not necessarily connected by blood, literally. right?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great call out. And it's one of the most beautiful parts of Fremen life in the deep desert here.
Yeah.
It's survival at all costs. And survival sometimes and oftentimes means treating everyone like family, making the sacrifices that you would for your own family for a complete stranger within your siege who you maybe barely know.
Yeah.
You know,
the tribe above all, right?
Somebody from a different department.
Yeah. Unthinkable in corporate America. I mean, yeah, I fought someone day one, but am I going to go out of my way for HR? No fucking shot.
No, get out of here.
Get
Are you
out of
kidding
here.
me?
Sales? Ew. No, absolutely not. They're on their own. They're running out of water. They're going to die in the week. We'll hire new ones. Turnover is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, luckily, Stilgar doesn't have to go through the incredibly difficult task of raising a child like Liet alone, because it is also around this time that Stilgar's love life kicks off, folks.
Hey.
He's here in the siege. He's young. He's impressive. He's
so
handsome.
tall.
He's tall.
He's so tall.
Everyone on the siege to Burr Hinge who put over 6 foot is just constantly matching with Stilgar. So let's talk about a little bit about young Stilgar's love life here at Siege to Burr. Stilgar would marry twice, actually, over the 17 years period that he spends at Siege to Burr during this time. His first marriage is in 10,160 AG, just a year after becoming Liet Kyne's blood brother / father figure.
Right.
And his first marriage would be with a woman named Misra. His second marriage would take place 8 years later in 10,168 AG to a woman named Darthar. Both of these women are from Siege to Burr. They're part of the Siege to Burr community.
It's also worth noting, I think it can get lost in the language a little bit. I'm fairly certain polygamy is just like a thing. Like, because again, Misra and Tharthar, they're both, this is concurrent. So it's not like he had a falling out with Misra. She took half the water. She took half my water rings. This is, he's just accumulating wives, basically.
They're adding to the family.
They're adding to the family, yeah. And I think that's also important because, like Paul technically earns a wife in Dune.
He does? And children.
And children. We never talk about them ever again. So I think this is a notable element of Fremen. As I was listening to you, I was listening through the like Western lens, and you're like, he was married twice. And I'm like, what happened to the first marriage? No.
Yeah.
They're both going great.
Happily ever after.
Happily ever after with multiple women. There's believe me, folks, there's enough Stilgar to go around. Misra's like dibs on the top
Stilgar
half.
To go around, Hello.
Darthar's like, it's all right.
Right. Which half of the 2 meters are you taking? Which meter do you want?
Split them down the middle.
Now, let's talk about, Stilgar's fucking, right? Let's not beat around the bush here. Let's talk about his children, his actual blood-related children beyond Liet Kynes. He has a son in 10,165 named Alir.
Mm-hmm.
He then tragically next loses a daughter to birth complications in 10,169.
Mm-hmm.
But just a year later, in 10,170, he has another daughter born named Kala. So Alir and Kala are 2 of Stilgar's blood-related children, with his wives Misra and Tharthar.
Very cool.
Now, here's where we get to point out a very fun deep cut reference that I need to give Leo you all the credit for doing the amazing research here.
Sure.
This completely went over my head. I forgot entirely that this was a detail. Folks, this is a very, very, very tiny reference to God Emperor of Dune. We're not going to talk about plot. We're not going to talk about why this takes place. But there is a particular character in God Emperor of Dune who is gifted a crysknife. And this character, Nayla, is told that this crysknife was owned by a certain wife of Stilgar, Misra.
Oh my God.
This Misra, the Misra we're talking about right now,
very cool,
is referenced in Book 4 of the Dune Saga in God Emperor of Dune. And this character, Nayla, is given Misra's crysknife all those years later. What a fun detail.
Thousands of years later. Again, not to say anything about plot, but this is far in the future.
Far, far in the future.
Also, as a reminder, Fremen women fucking fight. Like when, throughout the first book, when Chani admits that she's just been killing Fremen who keep wanting to challenge Paul. And she's like, what do you mean? I've been killing them because they don't deserve to fight you. What are you talking about? Like Fremen women fight. So just because Misra and Tharthar are in Stilgar's household as his wives doesn't mean they won't fucking throw down. Misra, of course, has a crysknife, a knife made from the tooth of Shai Hulud. Presumably, if it lasted for thousands of years, this is a fixed crysknife, not one that would break upon being away from the owner, basically. But yeah, very, very cool to see these little details kind of connect. Very cool. I did want to say one last thing about the children, Alir and Kala. I didn't see them come up again in the Dune Encyclopedia. I didn't see any mention of them in Dune. So I think that it is safe to say that they're around. And I don't want to say this too confidently, but I feel as though there is reference at some point to, that he's a son of mine, or like, I think that, again, when we're talking about the Fremen culture, we're talking about they sort of are absorbed into the tribe, and then they are just a member of the tribe. And the sort of like favoritism of that's my boy maybe fades a little bit because that's a member of the Fremen. That's the member of Sietch Tabr. That is a worm riding, raiding Fremen. I think there's no mention of their deaths. So when we meet Paul in Dune, it is safe to say, I think, that Alir and Kala, they're around, but they're not necessarily
productive members of Sietch Tabr, probably.
Yeah, exactly. They're out doing stuff. They're not necessarily in the spotlight because, again, there isn't this sort of like nepotism in Fremen culture where it's like, oh, well, he's the son of the Nabe, so naturally he's going to blah, blah, blah. No, that's not really in play here. So yeah, Alir, Kala, they're out and about. Maybe they're even at nearby Sietches, but just wanted to throw that out there.
That's a great in-universe explanation for it. And then, the out-of-universe like reality is that we're talking about extended lore here from the Dune Encyclopedia. Frank never wrote about Alir or Kala because Frank doesn't know who Alir or Kala are. He didn't make those characters up. The writer of the Dune Encyclopedia who wrote this entry made those characters up. And so that's why they don't appear in the original text. And that's why Stilgar never references them and why they don't come up in the original book. But that's sort of that's the fun part of extended lore is you get to build out this extra depth to a character that maybe reshapes your perspective of the original story, but natural pitfalls as well. It's like, it's not always, the puzzle pieces aren't always going to perfectly fit 100%.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of the beast.
That's true.
Alrighty. Well, this is a good point to take a break because up next, we're going to be talking about Stilgar's come up. How he becomes Nabe, his path to becoming Nabe, which is iconic. Just you wait, folks. And ultimately, what his leadership was like. How did he run Sietch Tabr? And did folks like Stilgar, the Nabe? We'll talk all about that and more in just a minute. So stick around. We'll be right back, friends.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're ready to hear about Stilgar's come up and whether or not people liked him. Spoiler alert, they did. He's great.
Yes.
So all of this begins in the year 10,175 AG when Pardo Kynes was killed in a cave-in, and the Fremen more broadly began to rethink their leadership, basically. So Pardo Kynes had been this sort of de facto leader among the younger generation of Fremen saying, hey, I've got this idea about a green Arrakis. Are you on board? And a lot of the younger Fremen were like, yes, we are.
Yeah. The younger Fremen were like, Skibbity. We're so
Rizzler.
So on board.
Yo, I'm mewing or whatever. Ohio. I think that's a thing. I feel like there's new ones too, but anyway, doesn't matter. I'm not in touch with Gen Alpha Fremen, but when Pardo Kynes was killed in this kind of tragic cave-in, there was a fear among the younger Fremen who had been, for decades, they'd been fired up, really excited by this idea that Pardo had and his dream for a green Arrakis. But the eldest Nabes, the eldest leaders, weren't necessarily as convinced.
Right.
And I think this isn't explicitly said, but I kind of get the impression maybe there was a fear of backsliding a bit into old ways. This dream would be abandoned. We don't want that to happen.
Yep.
So the younger Fremen, there was this trend of, you know what? Maybe it's time. I'm very capable in combat. I can take the Nabe in a fight. I'm going to challenge the Nabe. I'm going to become Nabe. And now I'm going to, within my Siege community, continue doing the work that Pardo was having us do to make sure that this dream for a Green Arrakis isn't going to be lost, right?
Yeah, exactly. Get some fresh blood in there, get some young blood in there was sort of the sentiment across the Sieges, especially after Pardo died and his leadership disappeared.
Right.
I think you're spot on. I also get the feeling that there was fear of backsliding, that there was fear that these older Nabes would be too cautious, too slow, too hesitant to continue full throttle toward the dream of Green Arrakis, you know?
Yeah.
Take out the older leadership, get some fresh blood in there. Are you hearing me? Democratic Party?
Are you hearing me?
Are
American
you hearing
politics? Me? Jesus Lord. Yeah, that hits home, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Uh-huh.
You know, the older Nabes, they were content to allow the young Fremen to go along with Pardo's plans, but are they going to allocate resources? We're not sure, so let's get them out of there. And again, yes, are you hearing us, Democratic Party? Now, no one, including Farad, the Nabe of Siege Tabr at the time, was surprised when Stilgar was like, "Hey, dog, I think it's time. I think it's time.
It's about that time.
It's about that time." So he challenges the old Nabe. Stilgar challenges Farad, and no one was surprised when Stilgar won. He's just, he won.
Yeah, there wasn't even a betting pool, you know?
Yeah.
People were like, who's
Should we bet on this?
Against?
No, it's it's literally the odds were so good. One guy was like, all in Farad, and then Stilgar wins, and he's like, no, I lost everything. Everyone else got like one watering. High risk, high reward. You know, that guy's addicted to gambling. Anyway. So none of that's surprising, right? This is all following a broader pattern that's happening in a lot of different sieges. But something that is unique to all of this is what happened immediately after Stilgar killed Farad, right?
Yes. Oh boy. So Siege Tabr is unique in that this was sort of like Pardo's base, right? The folks at Siege Tabr listened to Pardo Kynes.
Right.
And thus, after Pardo's death, one might imagine that Pardo's now adult son, Liet Kynes, would naturally be our next leader here at Siege Tabr.
You know, and I'm realizing we didn't put this in the script, but it is true, and we talked about it in Liet Kynes' episode. At this point in Liet's life, he was fully in like an apprenticeship with Pardo. He was like going on with Pardo to the Imperial testing stations. He was even showing up in some like, again, Imperial settings as like, I am potentially going to take over what you're doing, Dad. So we didn't include it in the script here, but it is important to note. So in addition to him simply being the son of Pardo Kynes, I think there is probably an awareness that, he's going out with Pardo to learn what Pardo's doing. So that
because
makes
he's
sense.
going to take this role.
Right.
He's not only Pardo's son, but legitimately has been trained up to take Pardo's role.
Right.
And the question now lingering at Siege Tabr is, does that role also include the leadership of this siege?
Right.
Now, in a wildly cinematic moment, mere minutes after Stilgar defeats Farad, Liet Kynes walks into the room.
Crazy.
The body is not cold, folks. The blood is still seeping everywhere
from the knife. Everyone's paused.
Liet Kynes walks in. Everyone pauses.
Incredible.
Because of course, now the question is in the air. The tension in the air is crackling. Is the Uma Pardo Kynes' son about to challenge his blood brother for leadership of Siege Tabr? Are we about to see Liet Kynes and Stilgar fight? But the moment quickly is diffused when Liet rushes over, presumably the still bleeding body of Farad, to embrace Stilgar and to congratulate him for becoming the new Nabe of Siege to Bur. My God, can you imagine the collective sigh that probably took place in that room?
Oh my God. I mean, I can't. And I want to. I want to see this moment on a silver screen so goddamn much.
Just the subtext and the layers there, the relationship that they've had. Gosh. But if the hug wasn't enough to convince you folks who are here wondering what's happening next, Liet does turn to the crowd and makes it very clear, assures everyone that, quote, he had been granted his father's position as imperial planetologist and would be continuing the work with the Palmaries that Pardo Kynes had begun, end quote.
Huge.
I am not your Nabe.
Right.
I am your imperial planetologist.
So I'm continuing my father's work, but in the role of imperial planetologist, not as Nabe of Siege to Bur.
Love a loophole.
Incredible. And the Fremen were like, all right. I mean, we think that's kind of, we weren't going to force the issue anyway because we love you both. So yeah.
Right,
sounds
exactly.
great. Sounds good.
No opposition.
Indeed. Now, I also wanted to throw in here, Stilgar's recollection of this moment is also heart-wrenchingly beautiful.
Oh my goodness. This got me, yeah.
Now, Stilgar described the moment as, quote, more fearsome than facing a legion of other men alone. I was terrified that my brother would call me out. And whether more from fear of killing him or being killed, I cannot say. End quote.
Oh my God, stop.
The idea that he is putting on the same level, like I am, as you know, we're all afraid of death. Like that's a core fear of this journey of ours ending. I am as afraid of having to kill this person and being forced by culture to do this.
Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, really, really
incredible stuff.
Really beautiful.
Yeah, you can really imagine Stilgar like frozen in fear when Liet walks in.
Yeah.
Holding his breath to see what his blood brother is about to do next, Like that must have been the longest 3 seconds of Stilgar's entire life.
Also his surrogate son, blood brother,
exactly.
yes. But also this is the child he raised.
The boy he raised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
The emotional layers in this moment, in this scene are amazing. Yeah. This would be an amazing thing to experience on the screen.
Also, Javier Bardem would just devour this scene. He's
so
good
goodness.
at that kind of nonverbal acting and that moment of waiting and not being sure.
Although I will say Javier Bardem would be a tough cast for this time in Stilgar's life because he's in his 30s at this point in the timeline. He's quite young when he becomes Nabe.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Someone younger.
We need
just as hot as Javier Bardem.
And well over 2 meters tall. Shit, this is going to be hard to cast.
This really narrows the field. Yeah, what a scene. Well, Stilgar is now Nabe, folks. This is it. This is the moment where Stilgar becomes the leader that we know him to be in the books, or at least he's in the role that we know him to be. Let's talk about that, though. Let's talk about his leadership style. Let's talk about some of these years of him as Nabe of Siege to Bur, leading up to the events of the first Dune book. So, just a year later, we're told in the encyclopedia, in 10,176 AG, the siege is thriving.
Yeah.
By all accounts, Stilgar is an amazing Nabe.
Yeah.
The siege has prospered under his command. He has led many successful raids against the Harkonnens, and he has begun laying the foundations and doing the work for some really smart long-term plans. And this I found really, really interesting because, yes, in the books, in the encyclopedia, we are told a lot about how effective a fighter Stilgar is, how great a leader Stilgar is. He can inspire his troops. He's 2 fucking meters tall. You'll be able to spot him across any battlefield.
Yeah.
What I found interesting in this part of the entry is that we get a glimpse beyond Stilgar's fighting prowess at his genuinely impressive administrative and strategic skills. He's not just a good leader because he can wave a knife around better than everybody else.
Right.
He is smarter and wiser than his peers as well.
Yeah.
That's why he is such a good name. We're told in the encyclopedia, for example, that he planned a, quote, gradual expansion of the cave warren, adding larger factory and weaving areas and extra classrooms for the slowly increasing number of children in the siege, along with the new wind traps and catch basins the larger population would require. End quote.
Oh,
Folks, that's like boring
cool.
spreadsheet administrative stuff, but he's out here doing it.
It's so good. I also, it occurs to me, now we'd have to double check this against some Prime Canon stuff, but I was playing Dune Awakening recently, and there was talk about Siege Tabur being a fairly large siege, actually, all things considered. And in Prime Canon, it is something like 10,000 people. It's quite a big group of people.
Yeah.
When we see it. But that's no guarantee that it was that large when Stilgar took over. So in many ways, I think we can see background storytelling that Stilgar saw the expansion of the siege, saw the growth of that community, and then accounted for it with projects, with, infrastructural elements, and then got it fucking done. This is very, very impressive. He's clearly a great fighter.
Stilgar was like, Green New Deal, we're doing it.
Yeah. He would cut carbon emissions to zero today, not 30 years from now,
Right. It's really inspiring stuff. This really stood out to me because we know he's a good fighter. We know he's tall. We know he's handsome.
We know he's so
But now
hot.
we know that he is also incredibly smart and forward thinking and is getting things done, like making more classrooms for the kids.
Yeah.
Pro education, like the Stilgar political platform sounds awesome. I'm all in.
It also makes sense why he would be such a forward voice then advocating for the idea of this Lisan al-Gaib, right? This, we are seeing also the man who is looking toward the future and seeing the potential and then doing what is necessary to set that up.
Yes.
Not going all in recklessly, but saying, yeah, should I save this kid who might be the Lisan al-Gaib? I'm not sure yet. But better to save him in case he can lead us toward a green Arrakis. Hedging my bets.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of that's here, right? In these details.
It's here. It's here in the details. I love it. I love this is the kind of thing in the expanded universe, in the second tier canon of the encyclopedia, that really adds to our appreciation. This is the sort of thing where I go back and revisit Stilgar in the books and go, that's my guy.
I like him more now.
That's my classroom wind trap building guy.
He's not banning books.
He's not out here banning books. Never.
Never. Not in a million years.
Careful, Leo. We might be getting too political.
Oh, we're not allowed to get political. Sorry, I forgot. Shit.
All right. We're talking a lot about his politics and his administrative skills, but let's not forget, Stilgar still a towering figure on the battlefield, and his fighting abilities do not wane over these years as Nabe. He does not go soft in a position of leadership. In the Fremen, frankly, as a leader, you can't go soft. You don't have the choice.
Right.
He has plenty of opportunities in his years as Nabe, in his early years as Nabe, to keep his fighting abilities sharp because folks are challenging him. For example, we're told in the encyclopedia that in 10,184 AG, just under a decade after he became Nabe, Stilgar was challenged by a Fremen named Jessel. And, obviously, Stilgar won.
Yeah, of course.
Again, if you're a betting man, don't bet against Stilgar in a fight.
His reach is insane. He can stab you from halfway across the room. It's insane.
It's so far.
It's not fair.
How are you ever going to get close? We're also told that after winning this fight against Jessel in 10,185, just a year later, Jessel's widow marries Stilgar, once again growing his family, joining Misra and Tharthar as wife. Now, Stilgar's family has expanded to a third wife.
Indeed.
There's also mention of Jameis. Remember him?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Jameis challenges Stilgar at one point in these early years as well. And again, it goes without saying that Stilgar wins. But the point we're trying to make here is that Stilgar was an effective leader, an effective administrator, a smart person, and continued to be the best fighter in Siege Tabur, and continued over his years of leadership, proving that time and time and time again as challenges arose.
Yeah. I also wanted to point out, so Jameis at some point challenged Stilgar, and Stilgar won, but naturally Jameis survived the encounter. So don't know the circumstances around that challenge or that fight, or like what that fight looked like. Maybe it wasn't a formal challenge. It was just a in the moment fight, because Jameis was also kind of a hothead.
Mm-hmm.
But there's mention of after that fight, Jameis going out of his way to save Stilgar's life, going out of his way to like share his water. There are multiple instances clearly of Jameis still respecting and really following Stilgar and giving him his like due respect as Nabe. So I also want to point out here, Stilgar was beating people in fights, but wasn't doing so in a way that upset the sort of dignity of the position, if that makes sense. Like Jameis fought him, lost, but still respected him and still followed him, so much so that when, of course, we see Stilgar go out to meet Paul and Jessica, he has Jameis in that troop, right? He chooses Jameis to come with him. And this is, I think, another quiet endorsement of the quality of Stilgar's leadership, that he is able to maybe fight someone off of a ledge and then still have that person respect them deeply and be one of their trusted kind of right-hand men. Like, very cool.
That's true. He's not leading by fear.
Right.
He's leading by having earned the respect of everyone at Siege Tabur and continuing to do things that earn their respect time and time again.
Now, this also dovetails us into one of the greatest details I learned about Stilgar from the Dune Encyclopedia, which is, folks, I know we all respect Stilgar naturally, but
of course,
do you have a wedding on the horizon? Because he's certified.
Hello.
He can
book him now.
Book him now. You have to book it far in advance.
His calendar books up so quickly.
You better. Quickly. He's doing weddings like 2 years from now. It's crazy. He's an officiator. He officiates weddings. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
In 10,176, so this is actually a little bit before some of the events we're talking about, he actually officiated his blood brother, his surrogate son, Liet Kynes. He officiated Liet's wedding with a Siege Tabur woman named Falra, which is such a cute detail.
What a good dad!
What a good dad. He officiated his surrogate son's wedding. That's so sweet. And Liet Kynes and Falra, they, of course, have a daughter. Ever heard of her? Her name is Chani. And, of course, Chani becomes... Whoa! I have heard of her, as it turns out. She looks like Zendaya. She's beautiful. So, yeah, Chani, daughter of Liet Kynes, daughter of Falra. Immediately, Stilgar and Misra were named the girls' godparents, which is important because Liet Kynes, at this point, is doing his father's work. Liet Kynes is doing Pardo Kynes' work as planetologist. So he's often out, dealing with imperial bullshit. He's at the testing stations. He's working. He's
Same
visiting.
Old shtick. Always traveling.
Always traveling. So just like Pardo Kynes naming Stilgar blood brother to Liet, Liet and Falra name Stilgar and Misra as the girls' godparents. In case anything ever happens to us, and because I'm always traveling, here's another family unit to take care of you, and just in case.
Yes. And
just in case is important because in 10,180, the worst happened. A rock slide. Again, a lot of hazards on Arrakis, not just Harkonnen troops, not just challenging one another and dying out in the desert. Great grandmothers of storms. Falra was killed in a rock slide, and Liet was still busy with all of Liet's work. And of course, Liet's work is important. The dream for a green Arrakis, keep in mind, Liet is a Fremen, raised among the Fremen. This is not just Liet prioritizing this imperial work. This is Liet understanding that for the good of all Fremen, a green Arrakis would be a kinder world for the Fremen. And so that is what Liet is sacrificing, is saying, I'm not going to be there as a father because what is good for all Fremen is me to continue this work, transforming Arrakis. Yeah. So Stilgar and Misra step in as Chani's godparents. And of course, his surrogate fathership continues with more people.
Yeah, truly.
And we get the detail from the Dune Encyclopedia that Misra and Tharthar, as well as Stilgar's basically now grown children, Kala and Alir, they all immediately warmly welcomed Chani into the family.
Oh gosh.
Basically
That's
just
so
like,
sweet.
hey, we got you, you're good. And Chani is just, she's an infant at this point. She's like 4 years old, 4 years old, something like that. So,
Yeah.
just immediately, without question, welcome to the family. You're part of the family now. And that is such important background. I mean, again, when we meet Stilgar, he's out in the desert. He's got Chani in his little troop here. Chani is his like surrogate daughter. And for as long as she's lived, he has been that father figure for her. I mean, I think within her memory. I don't think she's remembering, she might not even remember Falra if Falra died when she was 4.
Right.
So
really,
this is huge. Like, this is the family that Chani knows. Sietch Tabr is her Sietch, and Stilgar is effectively her father figure.
Yeah. Stilgar once again stepping into that role,
Yeah.
If there's one through line for Stilgar's life, it's that he is the dad who stepped up constantly.
Constantly. For so many people.
For so many people.
I wonder if he'll ever have to step up into that role again for an off-world. I don't know. So strange. I don't know.
Interesting.
Interesting proposition.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us basically up until the first pages of Dune.
Yeah.
That is Stilgar's life. From his time as a child in Sietch Umba, to his arrival at Sietch Tabr, to his connection to the Kynes family, to his come up as Nabe, and to his amazing leadership all these years of Sietch Tabr, earning the respect of his peers and his foes. That's the early life of Stilgar, leading up to the first book. And what I find really fascinating is some of the really interesting parallels that we've talked about here between Stilgar's life and the role that he will then play in Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune for Paul Atreides, for the Atreides that become so intertwined with his life and with his path. For just a couple of quick things to mention here, Stilgar, as we've been joking, plays the father figure for Paul, in particular, during that 2-year time gap in the first book, where Paul is being established among the Fremen and learning their ways. Stilgar is the person who plays that role for him.
Yeah.
Much like Stilgar did for his blood brother Liet, and much like he did for Chani after Chani's mother passed. But then I also found it really interesting that the way that Stilgar became Nabe and the way that Liet used this imperial loophole to not have to battle his blood brother according to Fremen customs is exactly the way that Paul rises to become Duke of Arrakis. Many in the books expect Paul to battle Stilgar. The Lisan al-Gaib should obviously become our leader, should lead us into the future as is prophesized, but in order to do so by our custom, he must challenge the Nabe for leadership. Instead, Paul declares himself Duke over all the Fremen, and he leaves the leadership of the individual Sietches to the Nabes, thus not having to battle Stilgar, much in the same way that Liet avoids that as well. So a lot of really fun parallels here from Stilgar's early life and how some of those things repeat in his relationship with the Atreides. And actually, all of this I'm sort of teasing out here is part of the conversation that we're going to have in part 2. This is Stilgar part 1. We wanted to cover his early life up until the first book over the course of today's episode. In part 2, we're going to explore more of these parallels and dig a little bit deeper into how Stilgar's life then intersects and is wholly reshaped by the Atreides. Stilgar's life will never again be the same. The Fremen will never again be the same. And much of that plays out through the life of Stilgar in the events of the first 3 books. So stay tuned for that. We will be covering more of Stilgar's life and going deeper into his life during the events of the book in part 2.
I mean, he is the main character after all. So he
is the main character.
We have to talk about how the main character changes and what the main character does,
Of course.
Yeah. I'm very excited to get into all of that because I think Stilgar as a character is so, again, without saying anything about plot, is such a dynamic piece of the puzzle. And I think he represents at a core level the embodiment of some of Frank's warnings about charismatic leaders and their effect on the people in their orbit.
Absolutely.
Which is not always explicitly pointed out, but is very much in the prime canon that we've talked about in our book clubs. So very excited to maybe put some explicit labels on some of that.
For sure, for sure. I too am looking forward to part 2 of this discussion. But folks, that is where we are going to end it today.
Indeed.
That has been the early life of Stilgar up until the events of the first book. But before we let you go, we want to remind you of a couple of great ways to support this show.
Indeed.
And to get in touch with us. So, the 2 best ways to support Gom Jabbar are to 1, become a patron. Patreon.com/GomJabbar. Ad-free episodes, access to the Discord, early book club episode drops, and much more. All of that at patreon.com/GomJabbar. Number 2, the second best way to support the show is to check out our merch store, GomJabbarShop.com. You can find both of those links and other useful links in the show notes below. So take a peek.
We also love to hear from you. So email us at gomjabbarpodcast@gmail.com. Do you have someone in your life who's well over 2 meters, covered in scars, and really great at consoling injured children? Tell us about them. And
I got some lonely single friends who are really looking for exactly that.
Very high standards regarding height of their partner. Yeah. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your concerns, your feedback. We'd love to see pictures of your cute pets if you've got them.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Anything you'd like to send our way, email us, gomjabbarpodcast@gmail.com. We respond within a couple of years.
That's
so
right. We'll
send an email now and look forward to that response in 2027. The world may be ending, but you'll also get a response from us.
That's right.
As the Paul Marys are burning.
A small glimmer of hope as global warming consumes us all in 2028, you know?
There's a national heat wave in the next few days. It's a very friend of mine.
Right.
Yesterday we were like, fuck, it's so hot. And then I checked and it's like, oh, it is technically summer, but only technically. And that feels bad. It feels bad for it to be so warm.
Yeah. Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib. And leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. And of course, we are also on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the golden path.